So guys, welcome back to RBR, and AMG finally did it. They took the 2016 F1 car and they turned it into a legal road-going car. But apparently, it's a flop, right? This is what everyone's saying, this is what I'm reading all over the internet. You look at the figures, for example, the weight is almost 1,700 kg, which is way too heavy for a hypercar, right? The 0 to 200 is basically the same as a 765 LT, that's what everyone's saying. 0 to 60, not all that impressive. £3 million cost. Servicing costs, sky high. What's the point of this car? But isn't that the question that we should be asking of every single product that anyone makes, regardless of whether it's a car, a watch, piece of clothing? What is the point of making this particular vehicle the way that AMG have made this one? And that's the question that I want to pose today, because on the face of it, when you look at the figures, none of it makes sense, right? We're going to drive it as well. I'm about to be given the keys and we're going to take it around the GP circuit of the Nürburgring, which is exciting in itself and you're absolutely going to love it. But first, let's take a look at what's under the skin very quickly, just to remind you what's actually powering this, what makes it so unique, and then we're going to drive finally the AMG ONE hypercar. So guys, a quick reminder of what sits under the skin of the AMG ONE. As you all know, famously, it's using the 2016 engine that Lewis Hamilton had, a 1.6 litre V6, 4 valves per cylinder. The entire power output of the car is 1,063, and that's not just from the combustion engine. The combustion engine is only around about 500 plus brake horsepower. The rest comes from other hybrid elements. We've got a small electric battery, which is actually shared with our, in terms of the way it's cooled, shared with our future C63. We have our front motors, which provide 326 brake horsepower as part of the 4MATIC system. We have the electric gas turbocharger on our combustion engine, which is also shared with the future C63. We have the MGU-H, we have the MGU-K on our crankshaft, all of these providing different power levels that all together come and make the final power level of 1063. I love the fact that 63 is in there as well, as a nice little nod to AMG heritage. So these days, 1,000 horsepower, not the biggest number in the world, right? Well, other stuff about this car is still very impressive. For example, the suspension. It's completely different to what you'd see on a normal road-going car. This has got a 5-link front and a 5-link rear suspension with your push rods and struts angled and done just like a race car. This is not something that you will find on any other road car, and it's quite fascinating. It allows the one to manage roll stiffness and heave independently of one another, and like I said, you won't find that on any other car. And if you choose one of the only track-only modes of Race Plus or Strat 2, the suspension drops by 37 millimeters into this awesome track mode that you'll see me use in action later on. The gearbox is mounted onto the body in white. You've got AMG's 4MATIC Plus system, you've got the titanium exhaust system. In terms of design, yes, all hypercars tend to look the same, but this one actually does harken back to some AMG greats, particularly I think CLK GTR, where a lot of this flavor comes from. And it's a nice little nod back to that car. Of course, the F1 car in terms of the nose and whatnot. And you've got little things around the car like the air intakes and the lights that do link to our normal AMGs. And indeed in the interior, there's bits of switchgear and stuff that you will recognize just from your A45, which is cool because it links to the top Halo car, right? But then there's so much about this that it just doesn't seem logical. There could have been a normal way of making a hypercar as well, but they've gone to all these lengths to bring all these things in from F1 and from racing, and you just kind of sit there and wonder, why have they done this? And truly, the only way to answer this question is to jump in, drive it, and that's when we're going to understand why they've made it the way it is. It's absolute bloody chaos here. Got way too little time, loads of people filming, trying to fit. I don't even know how. I pity the editor, who's me, who's going to be doing all this. Anyway, check this out. This is probably about £100,000 we estimate, isn't it, Jamie? In my hands right now. Do you want this on your racing rig at home? Stop it! So this is the AMG ONE steering wheel. Of course, very much F1 derived. Just look at the buttons like pass, which puts the car into the lowest possible gear, ready for overtaking, etc. You've got your DRS button here as well, which of course it brings down all of your aero so that when you're on the straight, you have less drag, more speed, etc. You've even got your light button here. But the rest of it is like familiar Mercedes, and they use the proper buttons, not the crappy touch ones that we have these days. Your mode select, etc., and your normal airbag, which isn't even leather lined. Probably to save a few grams. But how cool is that? Of course, you've got your lights in here as well. But just the uniqueness of this. And apparently the key is unique, and they've not shown anybody this. I'll be really jealous if they show Top Gear, but apparently only the customers will see that. So that's interesting, that's one thing. And then the car is so loud that they've kept earmuffs here if you're not using helmets. It is literally that you'll see. I'm really worried that you won't be able to hear a word I'm saying because of how loud it is. These are the wheels, and these are the special option ones, which are, it's pretty light, and I think these are like a 100K optional extra, which probably everybody's going to do, right? And what's cool is if you come here, you can see, just like on the GT Black series, Michelin have put the AMG ONE silhouette on there, because this is the specially developed tyre for the AMG ONE as well. So lots of development gone into this, lots of interesting little tidbits. Let me show you some of the inside as well. So guys, the car's all prepped, we're ready to go. I actually have to wear a race suit, so I'm going to jump into that in a second. It's chaos around here. Jamie, have a look around, show them what's going on. Got BBC getting ready, Chris Harris is there somewhere.
Go do that again.
But you can watch him later. Listen to me first, all right? This car, it's got so much F1 tech around it, it should require like an entire team of technicians to turn on, but it doesn't. Mere mortals only have to press the start button in here. It is literally as simple as pushing this button here, and then it does this like cat warming animation. Oh, don't get distracted, you. I know it's pretty. The car begins to warm up, which it's already warmed up. It's warmed up the cats, and you shift it into strat. This is loud, all right? Wait for this. There's nothing in the world like that. It's insane. Strat 2 mode is amazing as well. Check this out. So I'm ready, I'm going to pop on the race suit and let's see what this car can do on the road. Now before we start, here's some insight on how these press strips actually work. First off, they don't just hand us the keys to launch control out of the pits from the word go. Even highly experienced guys like Chris have to start with some sighting and warm-up laps so we can familiarise ourselves with the car. And in the case of the One, we'll be following AMG DTM legend Bernd Schneider in a GT Black Series. As for me, I'm not here to tell you how it compares to a LAF or a 918 or the next hypercar of the week. I'll leave that to everyone else. I'm here because I'm one of you guys, a driver of a normal performance car. So what's it like to jump out of your A45, C63, AMG GT and drive this bonkers thing? Let's find out together. So first ever, I'm not ready for this. We're good to go. So we're going to start in race safe mode, which is the first highway mode of this car. That's shifted into EV.
How did you do that?
It's in race safe, so it's deciding itself. I got my concentration face on because this is slightly intimidating. Bernd is a very good instructor and he's showing us kind of the ropes right now. Just getting used to the basics of the car. It's so different. I mean, the gear change is like badonk. First impressions are, what experience, man. This is crazy. So we've done our first 2 laps now. That was in race safe. Now we're actually going to switch into Strat 2, which of course Formula 1 based name that they've given to the track mode, which is so cool. So now I've put the car into Strat 2 as you saw, which is the race mode. So EV mode is interesting as well. Can you hear it? So you can take the car to Sainsbury's doing this, which is pretty cool. But then you speed up and we're in Strat 2. I mean, immediately it's louder. I don't even know if you guys are going to be able to hear me, I'll be honest with you. This is the loudest car. It's so reminiscent of the AMG GT3 that I had a passenger ride in Silverstone many years ago. But of course this is a road legal vehicle, and it's like nothing you've ever, people talk about, you know, 765 LTs and all the rest of it. You know, I've been in cars like that, and if you just go on figures, you know, you're not going to appreciate what this car is. You're really not, because this is not your average car. If AMG wanted to make a hypercar that was just a normal hypercar, they would have bloody done it, because they made that car in front of me, right? And that was, or is rather, the fastest car in the Nürburgring in terms of production cars, right? So it's not like they don't know how to do it. They could have had a normal engine and a lighter car and normal suspension, no need for all the hybrid stuff. But they haven't done that. Instead, they created something that is really the closest thing that you're ever going to have to a Formula 1 car on the road, using actual Formula 1 parts as well. We're on the straight now. BMW Empire, get out of the way! Get out of the way! The gear changes are ridiculous. Ridiculous. So you have some interesting modes here, like we've got pass, which brings the car into the lowest gear, ready for, as it says, passing. Or we've got DRS, which is something I really want to show you, because it's got a bit of theatre about it, and really it's the first road car to introduce something like this. Straight out of F1 again, you know. So now I'm going to hit DRS. You see the flaps go down, the aerodynamic drag releases. We're allowed to go that much faster. Then you come back on the brakes and everything comes back up again. It's incredible.
The engine is so sweet, so sweet. Listen to it. This is half the experience of this car. I'm driving in a car with an F1 engine. I mean, come on.
So theatrical, seriously. The turn in, you feel like you're literally magnetized to the road. But the amount of feedback we're getting through your feet, through your hands, in the steering. In that sense, you know, it really reminds you of the best AMGs, much like the Black Series, but dialed to flipping 100. I mean, it doesn't sound very, you know, typically AMG. It does sound totally race car, right? If anything, the Black Series is quite a, you know, reminiscent of this sound, where it's not, you know, stonking V8 type noise, but it's much more kind of tool for a purpose race car. Not big on growl or theatrical rumble or pops and bangs, but a tool for a purpose. Tell you what, it's not, you have to really thump your foot down to brake in this thing, and it feels almost like it's not going to work, but then the braking power is immense. But at the speed you're going, it is very intimidating. The steering wheel's interesting. You look at it and you think, how am I going to drive with this? And it's perfectly usable. It's a perfect balance. On the straight, I'm not even going full throttle. Like, there's so much more that the car can deliver, and I'm just not
There isn't the space to do it on just the GP circuit. Does it feel heavy? I think it feels its weight, you know, it kind of feels not dissimilar to an AMG GT. I don't think any of that matters, if I'm honest with you. I don't think that's the point of this. The point of this is, let's translate F1 to the road. It's a love letter to F1. How do we translate it? How do we do honour to all that history? And they've done it. Here it is. Do all the comparisons you like. There's nothing like this on the road. It is an F1 car. Yeah, it might not be the nth intense fastest. Yeah, other things that are normal in Formula are going to be similar in terms of figures. But will you ever get this experience in anything else? No way. No way. This is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Is any of this, like any of it, normal? It's not normal. Those gear changes are not normal. It's funny, little things like hitting reserve fuel level on the One, a little bit more terrifying than a normal car, right? Because you're thinking, is something going to go terribly wrong if I don't put fuel in this? Well, what's funny is then you got like the normal Mercedes switches and stuff, and it's like, it's so bizarre. But I love it. I really hope that when people get this car, that it is used as God intended, because it would be a shame if someone like me got it and just did a bunch of coffee runs in it, and that's about it, you know? The speed and the ability of it, it deserves racetrack time. It deserves to be in Strat 2. My hands are sweaty. I'm all sweaty, to be honest, in this AMG sausage suit. But I've learned so much from this. This is an experience, and I keep saying it, like no other. It's very easy to look at the facts and the figures and get lost in them and not appreciate the why. Why did AMG make this? And that's something that is so important to every product in the world. Why do you make a product the way it is? You know, what is the thought process behind this? Who is it for? What are you trying to convey? The honour is too high for someone like me. It's been such a limited access event. I don't feel like I'm worthy, but I'm so honoured to have done it. And as an AMG fan like you guys, like to be here and to be doing this, there is no higher honour. And there's nothing that, you know, it's a life tick box, and I am a very, very happy man today.
Driving the One for me was almost an out-of-body experience, in that my brain couldn't process what happened till much later on. However, once it sunk in, some things really stood out. There was no point where the car was at full throttle on the straights, or it would have eaten up the GT Black Series even in the shorter sections. The gearbox was clunky and slow, reminiscent of the thud from the V10 M5, yet it almost added to the brutality of the experience. But the steering wheel and feel was perhaps the best I've ever experienced in a road car. And the engine, the absolute highlight. A visceral experience geared to overload your senses and feed your emotions as a car lover. There's nothing that comes close to it. That's how I feel having processed it all, but perhaps the purest and most honest review you can have from me are my unfiltered thoughts seconds after driving it.
That is an experience and a half. It's only when you drive this car do you actually understand what it is. Because you all get lost in kind of the facts and the figures. You look at 675 LT and the 0-200 is this. You look at the 0-60 and you're not impressed. You look at the weight and you're thinking it's so heavy. But then when you step back a second and you sit in it and you drive it, only then do you realize the purpose, the why that AMG made this car. And after driving it, I think the why is quite obvious. They wanted to make a love letter to F1. AMG could have made a different type of hypercar. They've got a brilliant V8 engine that's used in the GT Black Series, right? It can do more than the 700 that car is pumping out. We know that.
with some other assistance. Why did they go through such a hassle and so many years of development in order to make something so bloody complicated that it almost did not come into series production, almost wasn't legalized for the road? The simple answer to that question is they wanted to make a love letter to F1, and they've made it. That is an F1 engine. It's got F1 technology. Yes, it's heavier, okay? Yes, the figures aren't going to blow you away. Yes, you can throw as many comparisons as you want. You drive this thing, it will blow you away. It is like none of those other cars that you will compare it to in the comments. I promise you that. It is the closest thing you'll get to an F1 car. It's the closest thing you'll get to a GT3 car on the road. And that's what makes it special. That's what makes any car special. It's about the experience. It's about what you take away from it after you've driven it. It's the fact that this brown man is completely sweating from head to toe in an AMG sausage suit, but is the happiest he has ever been. And I promise you, none of the other cars that you'll compare it to will make me feel this way. That's what makes the One special. Don't get lost in the figures, get lost in the why, get lost in how it makes you feel. And as an AMG fan, it makes me feel absolutely ecstatic. See you next time.